Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. Today, Jennifer and I will be having an affair with Pemi Aguda and her short story, The Hollow. So this is the first time that we've ever read from this author. So as is tradition, we have to, of course, learn all about her. So let me give you a little bit of a bio. This is from her own website / I found something a little bit more from something else and I can't remember what it was. Okay, so Pemi Aguda, which I hope I'm saying her name right. I didn't look it up, but I'm gonna say that that's right. Pemi Aguda is a Nigerian writer and architect known for her masterful blending of the supernatural with modern African experiences. Her stories explore themes of motherhood, identity, and tradition, often weaving eerie, unsettling narratives that linger in the reader's mind. She has an MFA from Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. Represent. Her writing has won O. Henry Prizes, a Nomo Award for Short Story, a Henfield Prize, and the Ritivism Prize. Her work has been supported by an Octavia Butler Memorial Scholarship, a Juniper Summer Workshop Scholarship, an Aspen Words Emerging Writer Fellowship, and her novel In Progress won the 2020 Deborah Rogers Foundation Writers Award. She was a 2021 Fiction Fellow with the Miami Book Fair, a 2022 MacDowell Fellow, and is the current Hortense Spiller's assistant editor at Transition Magazine. Ghost Roots, her debut story collection, was the finalist for the 2024 National Book Awards in Fiction and the Penn Faulkner Award. Okay, so she has a lot of awards there.
A lot of accolades for a person who is still pretty early in her career. I think she may be in her early 30s, something in that film. And I was very excited, Joey, to read that she was in Ann Arbor, Michigan in September of 2024, giving a talk about her writing. And yeah, very exciting to have her introduced to me in a way that felt really accessible. And I am absolutely in love with the story that she wrote that we are reading today.
I also really love it. Okay, so let me start with a summary because I haven't spoken enough. In The Hollow, one of the stories in the Ghost Roots collection, the boundaries between protection and control blur within the enigmatic walls of a house that shields three women, Madame Oni, her mother-in-law, and Arit. The narrative unfolds with a haunting subtlety contrasting Arit's delicate, uncertain experiences with Madame Oni's firm, grounded resilience. The house, though a symbol of safety, becomes a character of its own, exerting its own form of protection that sometimes overrides the desires of those it seeks to protect. Through these shifting dynamics, Aguda explores themes of freedom, boundaries, and survival, posing the question, what is a house truly meant to be? The story's multiple perspectives allow for a rich exploration of personal journeys towards escape and empowerment, ultimately revealing the dark complexities of reliance on something or someone else for protection. Aguda's masterful prose grips readers, offering both entertainment and profound insight. Jennifer, why don't you start us off by telling us what you thought of this story?
Joey, I really enjoyed the story. It was not what I expected, which made it even more exciting to read as it was unfolding right from the get-go. This is not a usual story. She had instantly drawn me in with the personification of the house by talking about the windows looked like crooked teeth and this pink color that's like a tongue. It's like, why are you making this house like a person? This is very interesting. And I will say that I was very impressed that this story was very short. It moved along, opened so many questions for me, and I'm sure that we will talk about that deeper. But for me, one of the great things about reading a short story is that you can intimately get involved with these characters, with these ideas. They're a little bit haunting, and there are definitely multiple themes going through this story, interwoven in a beautiful way, just like an architect would build a house. So when you told me that her physical background, like she's like, I am a writer, but I am also an architect. I'm like, aha. So many things make more sense to me now and are definitely reflected in this particular story. I did buy her entire collection, Ghost Roots, and I'm hoping that we'll have a chance to explore additional stories as time goes on. But I think this was a great introduction to her because it shot out like a cannon. Yep, I'm a fan. How about you, Joey?
Yeah, I love this story, and I think it was such a great ghost story, like a haunted house story. You could read it as just a haunted house story, and it would be great as that too. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance into this, and there's a lot of different themes that I'm sure we're going to explore. But In the synopsis that I just gave, saying that the house is personified is, I think, the mark of a great short story when an author can believably create the house as one of the characters who's this malevolent, evil force. And in this case, we can't really determine if this is a malevolent house, or at least I can't determine that. Before I go into all those details, I will just say that this is an excellent ghost story or haunted house story, but even if you're not into horror, I don't think that this reads very horrific. There are horrific things that happen in it, but I wouldn't categorize it as horror.
I'd have to agree with you, Joey. I'm not a blood and guts lover, and that was not evident in the story. It was very subtle. For me, the domestic violence, the horror of the things that happened to the women in this story, that was a horror story for me. In addition to the men all being killed, yay, men, all killed. Great.
So,
They deserved it in this particular instance. All three of them really were not acting as very good human beings and stewards of the privilege that they were given of being in these relationships. So I thought that was also really interesting. And there were only a couple very small references to blood on the floor or visceral indications that a murder or an execution or a mercy killing or whatever you insert name here, it's your perspective on the story. I think it was very effective in haunting and feeling haunted and exploring what does that actually mean to be haunted by a place, by a memory, by an experience.
there are so many ways that you could read this and interpret it and pay attention to certain things. It's not a visceral ghost story in that it's not bloody or there's not body horror, I should say, but it is certainly haunting. I think that it's not creepy. It's not going to make you like lose sleep over it. But I do want to read the very first lines because I think great horror stories, let me stop referring to it as I'm now contradicting myself. Great haunted house stories start with setting the status quo. I talk a lot about this with Stephen King. We've read one. Edgar Allan Poe does this amazing. Shirley Jackson, perfect. Let me just read it. The opening lines: "The house is ugly," Arrett decides when the taxi drops her off in front of her new assignment. Too many roofs, clambering over each other like crowded teeth and flaking walls like the pink of a tongue. She shrugs her tote bag higher and knocks on a gate so black she checks her knuckles for soot. A young boy, maybe 15 or 16, opens to the sound. That's obviously just the very beginning, but I think immediately we're introduced to the house as a character. As we were saying, it's being personified. It has a tongue in this case, and it's going to leave a mark. We already get that sense that she's not going to walk away unscathed from this experience in some way, although yeah, we've yet to discover. The other thing that this author did so well that could have been such a horrible miss that would have been like, oh my God, there's too much going on, was the multiple perspectives. It's such a short story. My ebook copy was only 30 pages, but that's probably like 10 pages or something in real life as a physical copy. And she somehow still was able to mingle all of these narratives into one to give us a broader perspective that we absolutely needed for this story. But we didn't lose the pace of this story, which is very important when you're trying to build suspense in a horror story, at least.
Yeah, Joy, I agree with you. The switching of the narrative, you were never lost. You were never wondering, wait, which character or which perspective am I in? It seemed very seamless. And for me, the story was also a parable about life. She asks us several times in this story, what is a house? And she gives us a definition of what is a house. But for me, it's like, what is a family? What is a person? What is a crime? What is the purpose of life? And can you rewrite that? And so those things were just constantly, very subtly, and then in your face being layered in this. And the reason I say that it felt like a parable for life, she's having a conversation with Madame Oni, who's the current owner of the house, who wanted her house to be fixed, right? The author asked us through the main character, Errett, what does it mean to fix it? What do you mean by that? And there's a whole passage, Joey, where they go through the various definitions of to fix something. And they start out very simply: to fix is to mend something. And it goes all the way to the end to affix a butterfly on a board pierced with a pin. It is very visceral. And she may not have used those words, but that totally made sense to me. We go through the general definition. And again, that playfulness with the English language. When we say a word, which variation of the word are we talking about? When I say thank you, do I mean thank you very much? Or do I sarcastically mean thank you, Joey? What does someone mean by using these seemingly straightforward words that actually convey so much extra depth? And so that was really impressive to me in her writing, that she was extremely skillful in a very short period of time to evoke all of these larger questions, which in some sense could be a little disorienting, which she also weaves into the story. This house throws people off balance. They can't really get their bearing.
I really loved the idea of language and exploring what is a definition to any of these words. She asks multiple times, as we've said, what is a house? And it changes every time. It's subjective to the person, and it's also subjective to that person's situation in the moment. We can see that language in a broader sense evolves, just this one word, for something that we all have an image for. If I say, imagine a house, you're going to imagine it's going to have four walls, some windows, a roof, and a door. But to each of these characters, that meant something so different. I just want to read the very last paragraph of the story where she finally gives us a definition in totality, I guess. What could a house be? She really demonstrates that it is so many things at one time. I would like to discuss after this, what does this all symbolize? Because I don't know that I've made up my mind. She writes, a house is a pot, a house is a bag, a house is a prison, a house is a supplication, a house is a justification, a house is a child on your back weighing you down. A house is a house and you can erase it, wreck it, tear it to the ground. A house is a house and no, you can never forget, but you can walk away. So beautiful. Writing is poetic for sure. And I just really love that exploration of like, what does all this mean? And just asking us that question repetitively throughout the story, throughout each of these women's lives, because we're following three generations of women, and it's fantastic. Great job.
Yeah, Joey, and I appreciate you saying that, because this is not random, the things that she put in that final paragraph. We, as the readers, have gone on this journey with her. We know why one person's perspective was that it was a handbag. One woman's perspective was that it was a pot. One perspective that evolved over time was it was a place to house her young child escaping from a domestic abuse situation. So there were all of these beautiful callbacks in that ending paragraph to say, I have taken you through the manifestation of this house, through a journey of how these women's lives have been affected by the choices they've made, by the people who have been involved in their life, the agency of the house to be like, bad guys gotta go. We're just going to hollow out. And I love the title. If they hollowed out a space to contain the bad guys, like a Venus flytrap, I'm like, nothing to see here, guys. Moving on. And I thought that was quite compelling in the storyline. Joey, there was a twist in here that I was like, what? I totally did not see this coming. And I reread it again just before our conversation, and I still feel a little literally sick to my stomach about it. She was giving us this description of her favorite uncle, who was this amazing man who spent time and attention, and he was an architect, and he would fulfill her questioning about architecture. He was this inspiration, and he really paid a lot of attention to her. And I was like, so great to have like these male allies in our life, that just because you're a girl doesn't mean that you're required to do certain things, until the sinister moment in the story where they're home alone. She did such a beautiful way of setting the mood for something not awesome about to happen. The uncle shaded in the windows that they were drawing and made them black. And he's like, now it's night. And at night, we never tell our secrets. The thing that happens in a house stays in a house. The things that happen at night are never spoken of. And then he rapes her at 14. And I did not see that coming. And that was completely unnecessary, Mr. Architect Man. I did not appreciate that until, again, this supernatural essence. The girl has been raped. She doesn't know what to do with it. She's 14 years old. It's like, you're a favorite trusted person of mine. She erases the house they drew together. And in real life, like a Carrie situation in Stephen King's Horror, she did something physically that the next day they're like, sorry, we're so sad. Uncle is dead. And she's like, really? That happened? Oh, his house collapsed around him. No good reason.
Yeah. Again, it just makes us question, well, what is a house then? Because this is something that is supposed to keep us safe. And it was the instrument for her revenge in this case. I don't know if we're supposed to believe that she did it. Maybe it was supposed to be a coincidence. Obviously, we have a house that can swallow people and add to itself, which is also a really fun trope in horror and haunted house stories where you have these impossible spaces where the outside looks like, okay, I understand what the floor plan is going to look like when I get inside. And then you're like, this is not supposed to be here. This room should not exist. You can't see it from the outside. There is a manipulation of time inside too. She kind of loses track of how long she's been in the house and then she falls asleep in it. So I think the author also really must understand haunted house stories as well. Otherwise, good for you because you did all that.
Also did this great job of describing from the outside, everything looks like it's a-okay. I see this house. I know what to expect when I walk in. I get in. I'm disoriented. There are secret passageways. There are hidden rooms. There are things not where they should be. Oh, right. Like the human psyche. Everything looks great on the surface, but her uncle looked great on the surface. Everybody thought he was this amazing guy. And yet he raped her. There was an inside evil compartment in him that got opened that day, and that happened. I just thought that was just such an interesting thing because she also uses the reference of a house is like a handbag with lots of little compartments. So you never know what's going to be in a compartment. And I just really, really appreciated her imaginative sense. When I started reading the story, didn't do any investigation about the author. So I did not know the author's sex. I did not know their nationality. I did not know anything at all, other than the curious fact that there's an apostrophe and then Pemi is her name. And I just thought that was also so interesting. So I'm reading the story and I was like, what time and place is this? Is this an American? Is this a foreign born person writing in English? Those things are curious to me. And there were just a few subtle clues in the story that this was written from an African perspective. And then finding out that she was born and raised in Nigeria, the imagination, the cultural references that were sprinkled through the story were even more charming. They were not off-putting at all. I thought it was so incredibly well done that for the majority of the story, I had no idea where and when this was happening. Again, we talk about timeless stories and being out of place. You don't have to be pinpointed in your specificity, but the story completely worked.
Yeah, there are some cultural references. There are some references to the food that Madame Oni makes her, and it's a very comforting and nostalgic thing for her to give her, I guess. I mean, it's probably why she falls asleep because she's so comfortable and it's like raining outside and she's like, oh, this is really comfy. But what I found was curious was that because she has this experience with her uncle who assaults her, he's an architect and he starts her interest in architecture, and particular in houses and house design. For reference, I'm not an architect, but I have worked with architects. I work for an architectural firm in New York City. So I'm not an architect expert. Okay. But usually you want to do other things. You want to do design of all different types of buildings. She talks about her peers are like, why are you only want to do houses? That doesn't make sense. So to me, I was also like, not because of that context, but why would she be so hyper fixated on wanting to design houses and fix them, inverted commas, if she's had this very traumatic experience? You would assume that she wants to do something, but she wants to be like far away from it, like the furthest thing from architecture, because you would assume it was going to be a trigger for her. But as you were talking about the experience that she had with her uncle, I was thinking like, oh, maybe this is her way of trying to redeem herself, is if she fixes other houses, then they won't be able to fall and kill other people. I'm assuming she feels a lot of guilt for assuming that she killed her uncle. So maybe this is her way of shedding the sin of that.
Joy, that's a very interesting perspective, like foundationally making sure things were solid. And for me, I didn't think of the actual construction piece of that. For me, it was more the metaphorical, how do you create strong relationships and safe spaces for people to be contained? And I really appreciate your calling out what she called out in the story. She's like, all of my colleagues are like, oh, I'm going to do a cathedral or a huge skyscraper. I'm going to do this major building. She's like, yeah, I'm just here for the houses. I don't really need to do anything else. And the writer does a great job of talking about using her left hand, which was her dominant writing hand and creation hand of doing the sketching. Once her uncle had died, she switched to her right hand. She was denying herself something. Oh, maybe my left hand is, I don't know, maybe it's magic. Maybe there's some extra powers in this left hand. So I'm going to force myself to do the right hand. And at the end of the story, she's like, you know what? I'm just going to just stick this right back over in my left hand and reclaim my power and my agency. Maybe it's time to let it go. I just thought that was so beautifully done. And one last thing, Joey, men don't have a good look in this story. There's no men who are having a good look. And I appreciated that viewpoint. And I also appreciated that one of the main characters who passes away during this and her son inherits the house. She was talking right before her death to her son's wife, mother-in-law to daughter-in-law. On my deathbed, just going to lay down a little bit of truth bomb here for you, right? She's like, this house does things. It is powerful. Just be aware. And of course, the daughter-in-law is like, okay, crazy old lady about to die. I'm not listening to you. Nothing like that happens. This is not reality. So I'm just like, bye-bye now. That's it. Then when something happens unexplainedly, although justified in the house, she's like, right, my mother-in-law was not nutty. This house is its own thing. And I really appreciated calling out the generational dismissiveness that we have. Yeah, geezer, I don't have to listen to you. What do you know? You're probably senile. I don't have to listen. And this has been true in my own experience. Older people have told me things. I'm like, yeah, whatever. My life is different than yours. How could you possibly know my experience? And then I lived long enough to have their experience. And I'm like, you might have known something. Wish I would have listened 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think the men in the story are not the heroes. We don't have any male heroes here, and that's okay. We don't need them. Women can help themselves, especially when they have a house that will help protect them. So since we're talking about the men of the story, who are obviously not the focus, well, they kind of are because they're perpetuating violence and stuff. But the one guy in this story that I don't know that this is 100% deserved was Madame Oni's son. Let me see if I can get the quote.
Joey, I do know where you're going with that. So I'm very curious for you to read that passage and get your perspective on it.
Okay, I'm going to read a little bit longer because I want like the full context. This is the scene. But the years introduced a sourness to their marriage. Her husband changed. He came home from his bank job frustrated by customers who screamed and a woman supervisor who always demanded more and colleagues who didn't respect him. And he took these frustrations out on his wife. The house stirred from slumber, moved in righteous anger because hadn't it protect this man when he was only a scared boy? Waking to behold the room shuffled around her, the wife finally remembered her mother-in-law's story and knew her husband was gone. Her knees framed the new bulge in her stomach, and she cried with sadness and relief and indignation and gratitude. The key word for me in this that I highlighted just this word separately was righteous, because the author is describing the house's anger as righteous anger, which gives us the sense that this house is so sentient that it has a sense of morality. The context for this scene is that Madame Oni overhears her son trying to, let's call a spade a spade. He's trying to force his girlfriend to have sex with him.
Feels like date rape to me, Joey.
Yes. And I'm not saying that that's not a valid thing. Okay. I 100%, if no means no, you just accept that and you move on with your day. So he was wrong. I grant that. There's no confusion about that. What I thought was, well, he's still a young guy, so we can make mistakes. And if there was an intervention, and I'm really not trying to stand up for this kid, if you tried to force someone to have sex with you, you're always wrong. There's never a right time for that, unless it's like a fetish fantasy thing and there you have safe words and stuff, okay? Then it's fine. But in this particular case, the house made a moral judgment. I think the author posits the story so that we have to decide, is this house correct? Was her son morally wrong for trying to force his girlfriend to have sex with him? Yes. Okay, yes, I totally agree. I just want to say, I think there might be a little nuance to say, what if this kid could learn? He's a teenager, he still lives at home. What is that conversation?
Yeah, Joey, the author addresses that for us. So you are completely on the right track because the author writes, and I don't have the quote at my fingertips, so reader tip at home, read the story yourself, get the real words.
This is
what Jennifer was really trying to say, but she used a lot more words than the author. That's why I am not the author. That's why I'm the podcaster. She says in her story, the mom walks past the room where the boy is coercing his underage young girlfriend to do something she's not comfortable with. She says, no, I don't want to do this. The mom pretends not to hear. She's like, okay, not my business. I'm walking on. And she's like, oh, the house didn't have the option to just turn the other cheek and pretend this wasn't happening. Consume the boy. The boy is gone. And the author writes, but he was young and he might have been able to be taught. This is the one strike and you're out policy towards this house. So when you said the righteous of its moral reckoning, the house is making the decision, because when we went back to where I thought you were taking us, Joey, was the husband who was the original owner's son who had grown up in that house. We don't have evidence, at least in how I read it, of him physically harming his wife. But I think he was browbeating her. I think he was emotionally not cool. And the house was like, we're closing this down because guess what? Your wife is pregnant. There's another life that is going to come into this house and we need to shut this down. We're not taking any chances. Is that how you saw that, Joey?
So I don't remember there being physical abuse by this guy, her son. Wait, is it her son?
No, there's several generations. So when you say her son, it's like that's a lot of people because it's generational.
It's the second generation son, right? So not Madame Oni's son?
It's Madame Oni, and then her son gets a wife, and then I think there's a third generation in there too. Okay, here's how in my head, and I would love the author to come and correct us on our timeline here if we have this incorrect, but my reckoning is we have the first woman who builds the house who is escaping domestic violence. She brings her son with her. So she has that son. So that son grows up and gets a wife, and he is frustrated in his life because he has a job that he doesn't appreciate. So he comes home and verbally gets on his wife's case, and he gets sucked into the house. And that wife, who blameless, right? She's like, I'm just in here, and the house just like sucked him in. That woman falls pregnant. She becomes pregnant. And we find that out immediately after the husband leaves. And I think the house was the sentient thing of like, we're not perpetuating that. So my thought is that baby that comes out of the woman who now just lost her husband is the son in the story who does the inappropriate thing with his girlfriend. Does that sound logical?
Honestly, I've read this a few times. Can't remember. It's like characters, but they're not named.
No name.
It's hard to keep them together because you're not assigning them a name. I don't think that's a negative towards this story because that's, I guess, just on me that I can't remember. I just like got lost in all the generation.
Joy, there's only one guy in the story who's not a jerk. And that is the houseboy who opens the door.
Lucky.
Lucky seems like a stand-up good kind of guy.
Yeah, okay, good. I forget what your original question was or what you were originally talking about.
The question was when you had said the righteousness of the house, I felt that you were going to say the second man in the middle of that 3 generations. Not that this is justifiable, but we did not have evidence in the story that he was physically abusing his wife. But the house was like, we don't like how you're talking to her. We don't like where this is going. So he disappeared.
No, I don't think that there was physical abuse, but something in that section that I did read, because other than the righteous part, because the house seems to feel betrayed. The author specifically says, because hadn't it protected this man when he was only a scared boy? As if this house is so sentient that it can feel betrayal. I was here when you were a scared boy. I kept you safe, and now you're betraying me. So it's just obviously unusual, but we do get an origin story for the house. We understand how it gets built. But because the original builder, the woman, I don't think she's named. If she is, I can't remember. She is putting in all of this, maybe not animosity, but some animosity towards her husband and anxiety. And there's so much on the line for her that she has to build this house, which, first of all, good for you, girlfriend. You just went out randomly and got secret jobs, got a secret bank account, and then built an entire house without your husband finding out.
Without a word, Joey, right? She said, I put my kid on my back and we walked out. That was the end of the story for that husband. We hope.
Yeah. And in the end, she says a house is a child on your back. So again, we're getting so much play with all of this language. And sometimes a house doesn't have to be a physical, habitable space. It can be a person that you're with. And so, there's just so much nuance. Really read this story. I mean, we say that every time because we're reading great stories. So you should just read them anyway. But this one, I feel like we both really loved it because of all of the language pieces in here. And it's a thinker. It really makes you think, what is my definition of all of these things?
And Joy, I appreciate that you brought up that that scene where we're getting the perspective of the house of, I protected you when you were a scared little boy. So for me, that was the original house owner's son who then grew up to be a verbal abuser of his wife. What I took away from the fact you put it in that way, we didn't have any physical indication that he was abusing her, but clearly he took his frustrations of his job out on his wife. And as I think you and I will both say, any form of aggression and violence in the home is not cool. I don't care who's doing it or how or why. It's never a justifiable thing. I think the author put that in from the house's perspective of, when are we going to break this generational nonsense? You were a scared child. You saw your mom suffer. Why would you now turn around and be that guy in a different guise? Why would you be aggressive and horrible to your wife? You should have known better. How did this happen? Bye. Gone. Okay, well, at least he's gone. So his baby that he doesn't know about, his wife is pregnant. She looks down and sort of sees the baby bump, is how I interpreted that scene. That, okay, this new baby will not have the blueprint. Sometimes we talk about, like, how does misogyny get passed down? How does the patriarchy pass down the secret rule book? And you're like, from man to man, hey, watch this. This is how we do it. And if there's not somebody there to interrupt that process, things can go awry. And I think in this particular version of the story, it's like, okay, well, the man who was doing this is eliminated. So now he's not even going to have a whiff of that abusive behavior because his dad is gone. So, oh, maybe there's hope for this new generation. And if not, don't have sons in this house, because the moment they slip up, they are out by being consumed by the house.
Yeah, although it would be interesting, what if a woman were to live in this house and commit some type of act of violence against her husband or her boyfriend
Or her
something?
child.
Yeah, or her child. That doesn't happen in the story, so we don't know. We don't know if the house is specifically protecting women or not. Although it's totally possible. We're already in fantasy, so we can assign whatever we want to it. But maybe a piece of the original owner of the woman who built it. I'm going to read this very poetic line in here as well. There may be a piece of her essence built into the foundation, and it's a piece of her, like it's her as a house. Have you ever seen Monster House? It's like a little animated movie. Oh my God. Okay. Well, millennials know what I'm talking about. Okay. Anyway, this is the lines about the original owner who had built the house. When it was time to build, she oversaw the project herself, breathing her fear into the foundation, sweating her resolve into the concrete walls. She rinsed herself at the site so her husband wouldn't smell new beginnings on her. Soon, no more, she chanted in her head. Every night, he added a scar to her skin. Every night, she added a terrified scream to her son's memory. That's devastating, obviously. But the one sentence that I think is so poetic and I absolutely loved was she rinsed herself at the site so her husband wouldn't smell new beginnings on her, because we don't know what that smells like. Who knows what a new beginning smells like? But it was like the very perfect line that you could put there. As recently, I've been talking about other contemporary authors who try to make poetic language in their books and completely fail. And this is exactly what I've been looking for. So great job.
Joey, I so appreciate that you took us there, because there were several instances in the house where they talked about touching the walls of the house and feeling moisture. And at one point they said tears were incorporated into the house itself. And so many, I can't read them all to you, Joey. I think you probably did what I did. Half of the story is highlighted with these beautiful, poetic, so precisely done, but not overdone sentences about the house, about feeling, about this visceral nature of experience. She said she opened the door of the house, and this reminded me of William Faulkner, Rose for Emily, where they said they opened up the house and it smelled all dank and dusty, and they're like, whoa, this is like a tomb. This is gross in here. They said in this story, the house opened, she opened it up, and it kind of took a second, and then it expanded a little bit. It feels like there is some other air just waiting to come out in this house. Okay, that feels creepy. And I totally thought that that was great. Like, the house was holding its breath. From the get-go, she was talking about the placement of the doors and the arches and the windows. This feels like it could be a cathedral. And there were beams of lights at time coming through, and she said it felt holy, as in spiritual, as in some otherworldliness. And I was like, you go get that story, Pima. You really put us in a spooky, haunted house frame of mind where anything is possible. I didn't doubt anything that happened in this room, especially when I could put it in the context of when she meets Madame Oni for the first time and she's like, "Does my house make sense to you?" And she's like, "Actually, I'm a little bit confused." And Madame
Actually,
Oni
doesn't.
said, "Well, what did you expect? Did you expect it to just be straightforward?" And for me, I finished that sentence in my head. Yeah, life is supposed to be straightforward. It's not supposed to have these weird twists and turns and things I can't explain and this vigilante justice that I don't even know is happening.
Yeah.
All of that stuff was built into that. What, did you think this was going to be straightforward? I'm like, wink, wink. Okay, author, you're telling me the story isn't going to be straightforward either.
Yeah, I agree that the author does such a beautiful job. It's very atmospheric and suspense. You were talking about how the airflow coming in and out of the house, helping add to that. But I think there's one part that I thought like, oh my God, this is perfect. Okay. I keep saying that this is perfect, but it's a really good short story. The light seems to hesitate at first, but then it floods in, glancing off the surfaces, filling the spaces, revealing the house to her. So even light is hesitant to enter this house, and it feels like it might not be able to come back out, sort of like a black hole situation. So again, these little things that the author puts in there give us so much information and create so much atmosphere and suspense without having to hit us over the head with, this is scary, be scared, have suspense. Like, aren't you feeling it yet? You're like, not now, I'm not. She just does it so masterfully. It's going to go up on my list of excellent haunted house stories. It's not scary to me. It's not going to go on that category, but it's going to be like, if you want to read a really good haunted house story, do this one. This is going back a little bit to what you were saying when you're talking about generational trauma. I feel like that's what this house represents now. I started out saying, I don't really know what the house is supposed to symbolize, but I think after hearing you talk about it, is that the house is trying to stop generational trauma from continuing, trying to stop toxic masculinity and patriarchy. And that's what I'm saying now.
I'm glad that that was where you landed on that. But I also love the final part of the story where she says, "You can't erase what happened here. You can't forget.
Mhm.
There's no fixing it. You don't fix being raped by your uncle at 14. You don't fix the guilt you feel for him magically the next day for no apparent reason gets collapsed in a house that you magically erased with your magic eraser, right? Okay, that is all fine." She said, "But you don't have to live in this house and you can walk away." So the house of your physical body, the embodiment of your experience is always going to be in there. It's literally woven into your skin cells, into your heart, your mind, your psyche, how you present yourself, the clothes you wear, all the stuff. She's like, but you can acknowledge that and walk in a new direction. You can shed all of that and make a decision for yourself. And I really found that to be a very profoundly hopeful message of, yes, there's no fixing it, but there is an opportunity to lay down that burden and walk away. I looked at a few of the other titles in this short story collection, and I am so excited to read more of them because I think there's a big push, if I'm judging a story by its title, of becoming your own person, of taking agency for your life and reconciling your past and moving ahead. So super excited to check those out.
Yeah. And I think it's a hopeful message in the end that you can't necessarily fix all of these things, but a lot of things, there would be no way to fix it. Like you said, how do you fix being sexually assaulted by your uncle? You can't fix that, but you can accept it and work through that trauma and walk away from it. I'm not saying that's how everyone should do it. I'm just saying that's a moral of this story here. Seek out therapy if you want actual advice. But I do think that's still an answer to generational trauma. I think that's what you would have to do. You have to acknowledge it and say like, okay, this is a thing. This house is haunted with the spirits of whoever or whatever, and then walk away from it. So exactly the same thing.
Now, Joey, I'm just mad. I'm just mad. I'm not mad at
Why?
you, obviously. Hearing what you just said, yes, let's walk away from generational trauma. Sounds great. Let's do that. Everyone's on board. Why I'm mad, there were 3 generations in this house that are clearly being abused, mistreated, underloved, for lack of a better word. Nobody steps in. No outsider comes and's like, the authorities are here. Dude, don't beat your wife. Don't rape your girlfriend. You know, some basic societal rules we've all pretty much agreed on are a good idea. No outside force is protecting these women. Nobody in their family. Their brothers don't come over. Their friends don't come over. No one is helping them. So I have to write a story as the author of, well, I guess no one here cares about what happens in the private lives of these women characters. I'm going to let the house do it. somebody has to be watching out for these ladies. And now I'm mad about society. I love the story. The story is still
well, in my imagination, it's a concrete fortress. It has thick, heavy concrete walls that you probably can't hear through. Things are not escaping. This is supposed to contain everything and keep everything out. It does not do that. If it was just a regular house, it would not have done that because the original husband would have gotten in and probably killed them. But of course, it saves them. But there's one line that I want to read.
Joey, while you're finding that, can I just make one note that just popped into my head as you were saying this? There's a lot of conversation in this story about boundaries, about the uncle when he's talking to the young lady about drawing. There's definitive boundaries. And when the original bad guy, the husband who comes to the house, they say that he jumped over the wall and he breached the security. He entered a place where he was not supposed to be. So I hope you're taking us in that direction.
Well, that's a good point. Yes, he is breaching it. But my point was that I feel like it's an intentional act by the house to keep everything within. And I think that this section describes that. So as she steps in, the stillness intensifies, breaks across her face like cobwebs. Not serene calmness, but a muzzled nothingness, like a familiar hand across a mouth. So to me, that was, again, a beautifully written way to explain how stifling this house must feel for some of the inhabitants. I don't know that all of them. If you're on good terms with the house, probably you don't feel that way. But to have that sensation of a familiar hand over your mouth, to me, it just felt like this was intentional. The house meant to have good intent, to keep everything inside, but instead, this is where the malevolence might come in here, because it's acting under the guise of, not malicious, righteousness, then it's overstepping its own boundaries.
I appreciate it that you took us to that phrase, because that was definitely one that I highlighted. I think a lot of people have a fear of spiders and spider webs, and that's like inherently kind of like creepy feeling when you're walking through a place and you get like cobweb on, you're just like, ugh, nobody. Shouldn't say nobody. The people that I know do not enjoy that experience. That's not something that they relish and look for opportunities to have cobwebs draped over their face. So you're already getting that visceral, ugh, yeah, I don't want that. And the image of a hand covering your mouth and choking off your ability to express yourself, right? Exactly what you said. The house is stifling you. And when you said nothing comes in or nothing comes out that the house doesn't control, I'm like, yeah, including your screams. But it seems like these guys are enveloped by the house in such a timely manner that it's like, no muss, no fuss, gone, like a magic genie in a bottle. Nobody had to bleed here. You're just literally erased. You just don't exist anymore. You have been written out of the story, written out of life. You're gone.
Well, then they become a part of the house, so they still exist. It seems like the author is trying to say that the floor plan doesn't make sense because the house is continuously adding on to itself. So I'm assuming it's consuming these people, these men, and then is able to continue to build on.
That's terrible, because now, if that is true, I love your theory. If that is true.
Okay.
The house was created to escape domestic violence, and her blood and fear was in there, in the walls. It's in there. So now people are living their life. The guy goes away. She escapes the bad husband before he comes and finds her and gets murdered in the house. She's like, I'm here with my son. We're having this great life. Everything's wonderful. Uh-oh, creepy old husband comes back and finds me. Okay, the house took care of it. It ate him up, right? It just like consumed him and incorporated him. So does that mean the evil of the house is growing, or the power of the house to do harm? Because to me, the house is the good guy. It's not killing the mailman, right? It's not killing their dog. It's not just randomly scooping up people. It's people who have violated the societal contract to be good humans to each other. And it's like, well, we're not having that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know. We only know that it acts with a sense of righteousness, but that's subjective.
According to?
Yeah, what's morally correct and who's the one judging it? This house, where's its brain? How is it making these I mean, I think we're looking a little too far into it like that, for me at least. But yeah, I guess we have to determine as the reader, are these actions righteous? Is that the correct thing that should be happening? If someone is an aggressor, what is the appropriate response to that? Is it eliminate them and to consume them? What story did we just read that she wanted to eat someone? She wanted to masticate him with her teeth?
Yes, that was exactly a story we read. And with my brilliant memory, I cannot recall it, but I know that that was something
Yeah.
popping up. But again, this consuming, this taking revenge, this idea of who will stop people, men in this story, from perpetuating violence. And Joy, as we say in almost every story that we read together, we as readers, as thinkers, as empathetic people, people with their own imaginations, we create 15, 20, 100 different storylines that could be happening. We don't know enough about the story to say definitively, look, Joey, it says this in the text. I'm right. It's more of the conversation of what do you think happened? For me, the ambiguous nature of so many things in this story leads to these great discussions. And it's exactly, to me, one of the key components on, is this a good story? Would I hold this up as an example to someone of like, you want to read a great short story, try this one. And I definitely can say that, because if you don't walk away from the story wondering, what was that about? I think you might have done it wrong. Not to judge, but maybe go back and read it again, because there's a lot of questions that could be coming up for you.
Yeah, I think ambiguity is also another hallmark of great horror. I'm going to call it horror. I don't care. Tell me different, people. I think there has to be some type of ambiguity in a horror story for it to really work, in my opinion. Maybe that's just my reading taste. That story I was referencing was Los Angeles by Ling Ma. It's the last one we just read. When she catches up to Adam and she's like, I just want to tear this person apart.
Indeed, Joey.
And A Magical House.
And why did she want to catch up with Adam?
When he was a
Because he
okay.
was a really rotten piece of unnecessary humanity who had
Yeah.
hurt her. I'm like, very funny. I will say an interesting coincidence. I do not feel that we planned that out.
I
Clearly
didn't see that.
since I did not read either of the stories before they appeared on our reading list. Yeah, maybe the stories are trying to tell us a story, Joey. I don't know.
Yeah, that's funny that they both have magical realism houses and abusive partners in them. Okay, well, a happy accident.
Happy
Who said that?
accident.
Bob Ross, right? Wait, who's
Yes.
the painter guy? Yeah, Bob Ross, right? Yeah, with the fro.
It's, yes, the very beautiful Bob Ross and a happy accident. So let's talk about something that's not accidental, and that will be the next story that we will be exploring together.
The next story we're going to be reading is A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
That sounds like the potential for more magical realism, but I will save any commentary on that until we have a chance to meet. Thanks, Joy.
Bye.